Continue. Boom. Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. You're going to notice that if you've been here before, that today looks a little bit different. Our beloved Larry he's taking some much deserved PTO this week. So I'm flying solo, which is frightening, is all you know what. I'm going to do my best. Technology along with social media actually are not my strong suits, but I'm going to beg forgiveness later. This format too, you guys, is the webinar version, which means that I don't think that maybe there is a view where I can see you guys. Let's go. Yeah, I don't think I get to see you. Anyway, okay, let's just get started here. Thanks again for taking your afternoon time to be with me. Today's topic, and I've got some notes down here, so I'll be cheating over to the side. We're going to talk about cash out refinances. I assume most of you have heard some of the major headlines and some of the changes that have come about in the last couple of months, conventionally especially, that's the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, related to cash out refinances. So first, let's do some unpacking. We have quite a bit of unpacking to do, so we're going to take some time. I almost expect this to go a little bit over 2 today, so if you can't be here for the full time, make sure that you come back and get anything that you missed on the recording, which should be up, I'm going to say maybe by Thursday, because Larry's out and he's our tech genius. So just maybe a little delay on that, sorry. Okay, so cash out refinances, there has been those changes real quickly, and I'll go through this in greater detail, and then the hacks and tricks that we can apply to maximize our returns with as much speed as possible. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac both recently announced that there is now a 12-month seasoning period before cash out refinance is viable. Before we get into that, let's start by making a quick exclamation or definition. There are 3 different types of refinance for investment property. These are a rate and term refinance, a delayed cash out refi, and a standard cash out refi. I'm going to quickly define each one of those. Rate and term refinance is simply taking an existing loan and replacing it with a new loan. You will not get cash in hand. Okay, that is a rate and term refinance and comes with entirely different rules, which will be a real strong talking point about some of the hacks and tricks that we can impose in today's call. Delayed cash out refinance. So both of them are cash out refi, delayed and standard, right? The primary differences between these two is speed. And prior to the change, right, delayed had no seasoning requirement, which is still true, by the way, I'll get there. And the standard only had 6 months seasoning, right? This one has changed. It now requires 12 months seasoning before you can pull cash out. Now, the how you define which it's going to be for you, the delayed versus the standard, depends on how you acquired the property. So let me go into those details so everybody is clear in what that means. In order to qualify for delayed cash out refi, there is no seasoning, even today with the new rule, no seasoning required using the delayed cash out refinance product. Okay, those rules have not changed, but it requires the following. The acquisition must have been for cash, your sourced and seasoned funds. Let me define sourced and seasoned. The funds used to acquire the property originated with you, and you can show that you've had them for at least 60 days. All right, so here's something that wouldn't work. Let's say that there is a large deposit listed in a statement that you gave us that show your cash to close that you used to acquire that property. And within the statement, we need 2 months worth, right? 30 banking cycles. In that statement, there is a large deposit, and a large deposit will be defined as anything over 50% of the income that we're using to qualify you. So if you make $10,000 a month, or that's the income that we're using to qualify you, and I see a $5,000 deposit in that account, it will be questioned. And I'm going to say, where did that come from? As long as you can paper trail it and show us that it originated with you, you sold some stock, you got a bonus at work, a tax refund, you pulled money from a HELOC and deposited it into this account. Any one of those things is perfectly acceptable. Those are your source and seasoned funds, and I can show where they originated from you to end up in here. What will not work is if Great Aunt Betsy says, here you go, Christina, here's $50,000, go invest in real estate. Well, thank you, Betsy, I love this, I'm going to go do that. you can't use those funds until it's sat in the account for the full 60 days to where we, the lender, no longer see the $50,000 deposit. We only see the balance. So as a rule of thumb, depending on your banking cycle, right? Some people have the 1st through the 30th or the 15th through the 15th, whatever it is. So depending on that, you're going to have to keep in mind that if you do have funds of that source where you're getting a gift from someone or you're borrowing them from someone, whatever it may be, and you don't have that seasoning yet, stick them in an account as soon as possible, right? Let them sit there for the full 60 days or 2 months worth of banking cycles to where we don't see that deposit anymore, because you will not be able to justify that those were your source and season funds. This applies for the delayed cash out refi. It also applies to if you're just doing a straight purchase where you're putting 20, 25% down, okay? So the rules about cashing out when we're using the delayed cash out refi: no seasoning required. You must use your own source and season funds, and you are limited to actual cash in hand to the total amount listed on the final closing disclosure when you purchase the property. Now, this is important, and this is where we're going to get into the weeds a little bit on this one. So when we kind of use, a lot of times when we're doing cash out refinances, their BRRRR method has been instituted, right? Buy, rehab, rent, refi. Everybody's probably familiar with that. When there is renovation or rehab associated with the investment, you must make sure that both the purchase price and the renovation cost, the total acquisition cost, which includes both of those things, are listed on that final closing disclosure. Okay, I'm going to say that again. The purchase price and the rehab renovation both must be listed on your final CD, aka closing disclosure, in order for you to get up to a maximum of that total amount back cash in hand. Okay, whatever is listed there, and it can include some of the closing costs that may be minor closing costs that you paid in the acquisition, right? That's part of what you can get back to. If you purchased the property today and you paid $50,000 for the property, you own the property tomorrow, it's closed. And then their renovation or rehab is $25,000. And the day after, you are now officially the owner. The $25,000 you send off to the GC, the general contractor, it didn't find itself on that final closing disclosure. You are not eligible to get that $25,000 in rehab back. You are only eligible to get the $50,000 that is listed on that final closing disclosure. Okay, I see this all the time, and you guys I know have heard me talk about it before, but it's very, very important that if you want to maximize your return and get as much of your capital back as quickly as possible, the delayed refi can still work for you as long as the funds to acquire are cash, your source and seasoned, and the total acquisition cost is listed. Now, let me take that a few steps further. Sometimes people will come back and say, well, I don't really want to pay the general contractor $25,000 in advance of them even starting the work, which is a very legitimate concern. I wouldn't want to either. So unless you have a strong, long-standing relationship with this general contractor, whoever's going to be doing the work, and you trust them and you have no problems doing that, here is the workaround. You want to make sure that the escrow company associated with the closing will allow for something called an escrow holdback. Most of them do, but not all of them do. And the difference could be a big deal if you don't check in advance. So make sure that you're asking if they will accommodate an escrow holdback, in which case all of the funds they get into escrow. Escrow is going to take the $50,000, I'll keep using my example, and give it off to the seller. The $25,000 that's for the GC is going to be distributed based on draws that you approve. Okay, so that's where you can kind of protect your investment a little bit more, so that you're not just throwing 25 grand over to a new relationship and hoping that the work gets done, let alone in a timely fashion, right? So the escrow holdback will protect those interests. Make sure that you do it that way. So we've accomplished all of those variables, right? We've got everything on that final closing disclosure, and you've not opened yourself up to any uncertainties by just sending out the entire amount up front before anything has been done to the property. So in that example, guys, that still is immediate. The delayed refi allows for speed. If you do it that way, you do it correctly, okay, you don't have to wait 12 months based on those two primary components. What I would suggest, if you're new to this and you haven't done it before, Your best course of action is to get a draft closing disclosure, send it to me, send it to us first so we can take a look at it and make sure that all the line items are correct, make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, and that we're in a good place so that as soon as it's appraisal ready, you're coming back to us, we're doing the cash out refinance, and there's no issues. And on that note, real quickly, make sure, don't wait until the property is appraisal ready before you come back to us to execute the cash out refi. You want to be to us almost the minute that you have acquired the property, prior to the renovation even starting, unless it's a huge renovation job and it's going to take 6-8 months, whatever. Otherwise, get in line and make sure that the refinance is underway. In that case, we're going to get everything up front that can be done. All of the T's crossed, I's dotted. We're going to order that appraisal, which should be the last piece left and necessary. We're going to order the appraisal within a day of you coming back and saying it's ready to rock. And then we should be closing within a few days of receipt of that appraisal back. So doing it the other way, where you come to us once it's appraisal ready, we have to start from ground zero, and it's probably going to take us 30 whatever days to get done. So I would be sequencing and planning ahead in that case. All right, so delayed, unchanged. We are good to go there. Any questions so far? Let me see. Let me look at my Q&A here, guys. I told you I was doing this by myself, so here we go. Mr. Cross, so with delayed, if I'm understanding the purchase is 100% your cash, there is no financing. That is correct, Alex. No financing can be used on the delayed cash out refi rule. If you have used leverage to acquire the property of any kind, you have broken the applicable use of delayed refi, and then you would fall into standard cash out refi, and that's when that 12 months will apply. But I have some hacks for you there too. We'll get to that. Mr. Cooper, in this case, you'd have to have that refi or rehab cash up front to the title company. That is absolutely correct, sir. Everything has to be on that final closing disclosure in order to maintain that speed. Because remember, the rule of delayed refi says you are only eligible to get back maximum cash in hand, the total number on that final closing disclosure. So if you paid for the property, right, it's closed, it's done. The closing disclosure only has the purchase price sent off to the seller. The renovation came after. It's no longer eligible to get all of those funds back, and you'd have to wait. You know, another thing too on the delayed refi, the rules say we are allowed to take, that let's use single family residence, 75% of the ARV in cash back, not to exceed what's on the CD. Well, let's say, just real quickly, I'm taking a U-turn here real quick. Let's say that the ARV is massive. It comes in higher, or it's the expectation just shoots everything out of the water, and you are now eligible for more than what was on that CD. Okay, let's use real numbers. Let's say that the ARV came in at 200,000. Okay, 75% of 200,000 is a loan amount of 150,000. What if the CD only had 100 grand on there, but you got everything on there that you were supposed to get on there? Your total acquisition was 100 grand, right? If you wanted that extra 50,000, delay doesn't work anymore, because you're going to be limited to what your acquisition costs were. In my example just now, 100 grand. If you want that extra 50,000, you're waiting 12 months. Is it worth it? Maybe. That's a big number. So depending on your circumstances and the numbers of the transaction, you know, there may be some conversations to be had and what makes most sense. Okay, I'm going to pause on questions. I'll come back to those in a second. So delayed refi, we've got our standard refi. Let's talk about that really quickly. I kind of dipped into that. So the standard refi does not have any of those rules. So everything that I just gave you guys on the delayed side, where you got to pay cash and the total amount has to be on that CD, all of that goes away, right? Those restrictions or those guidelines, those conditions are no longer relevant on a standard cash out refi. But what is relevant now is you've got to have 12-month seasoning. Let me take a step back. I want to explain to you guys why Fannie and Freddie came up with this new rule. Okay, well, what's going on in the background that's requiring some of these updates and changes? There's a few things actually. Obviously, the first is going to be the housing market, right? If values are going to continue to come down, and I'm still on that soapbox, I still believe that in most markets we're going to continue to see the deterioration of home values. They're going to be coming down, and you're refinancing at a value today of X, right? And the value may be Y tomorrow. So there's a piece there. But the more important piece, and this gets a little bit technical, so feel free to ask your questions, it has to do with servicing runoff, okay? So when we talk about closing on a loan, and we're talking about investment properties right now, you guys all know about the secondary market and mortgage-backed securities, right? You've probably heard those terms before. But what you may not be aware of is that as mortgage-backed securities are bought and sold, there is a servicer associated with that particular mortgage that paid a premium for the rights to service this loan. Let me be more specific. So you guys close on a loan with Ridge, okay? We underwrite in-house, we fund on our warehouse lines, everything is in-house, but we don't service these loans. We don't keep the servicing rights. We're going to bundle up $10 million worth of mortgage-backed securities, and we're going to resell them on the secondary market to what we call aggregators. You guys are going to know them as servicers. So who you're making your mortgage payment to, maybe it's Wells, maybe it's Mr. Cooper, whatever, they've paid for the rights to service this investment, and they're going to collect your payment, and they're going to be the ones responsible to send the principal and interest off to the shareholders. They're going to send the taxes to the county, the insurance to your insurance agent, right? That is the servicer. Again, the servicer has paid a premium. Usually it's 1% of the aggregate of the bundle of mortgage-backed securities, okay? Well, in those terms, typically it's about a 36-month window before the servicer is in the black, before they're profitable. Knowing that it's going to take them 36 months, they pay up front a premium, and after 36 months is when they're going to start seeing profits for the work and the service of doing what they're doing. What do you guys think is going to happen in the next 12 or 24 months with the mortgages that are closing last year and right now? Interest rates are higher, right? And we have full anticipation that they're going to come back down, right? Rates are going to come back down. What's everybody going to do? They're going to refinance these mortgages, right? A servicing runoff. So as a result, they're prepared. And that's why a lot of you are seeing that points associated, especially with investment properties, are higher than they have been, because these servicers are aware that they're going to be in the red in a lot of these cases, that a big chunk of their holdings will refinance before they're in a place to be profitable. So for that reason, you're paying the extra points. And then also on these cash out refinances, that's the extension, that extra 12 months, so that you're left, you keep that property before any of that extra damage can happen. So those are the why behind the how of Fannie Freddie's new imposed 12 months on a cash out refinance basis. Feel free to let me know if there's any questions. I'll look at those again in a second. Okay, so let me get back to, we talked about the delayed refi. Here's some of the hacks. The standard cash out refi, there are no restrictions. You don't have to, you're not limited to what was on the CD. You can get as much as the appraised value and the LTV allows, and it doesn't matter how you acquired the property. It doesn't have to be cash. You could have found a box of money on the side of the road. You could have gotten leverage. None of that matters anymore, but you lost your speed, the velocity of money, and being able to churn. If some of you have the intent to continue to do this over and over again, especially right now in this market, when we think we'll be able to get these good deals, it could be pretty damaging to only have access to that capital once every 12 months, right? Here are some of the hacks. Actually, you know what, before I get into the hacks, let's answer some more questions. I got that one. Mr. Corey, hi, Caeli. What if you set aside rehab funds and do not use all of it? Do you have to do a refinance? Corey, I'm not 100% understanding the question. I may unmute you, but it brings up another piece that I want to talk about. So if you are prepaying the contractor with the CD, right, on an escrow holdback basis, generally speaking, if you're doing this, you're probably going to get 3 different bids. Most people will get 3 different bids. And generally speaking, you're going to take the middle bid, depending on variables, okay? But let's say that you take the middle bid. I don't know about you guys, but in my fairly limited experience where I've dealt with general contractors, the initial bid that comes out is almost never what it ends up being. It's always a bit higher for whatever those reasons or circumstances are. So what I might recommend is adding a few, a few $1,000 to the top of that bid so that you're not leaving any cash on the table. Otherwise, you need to have a conversation with the general contractor that says, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to pay. If you end up going over, that's your problem, kind of thing, right? Set that expectation up front. Otherwise, maybe pad it a little bit with the understanding that that is for absolute necessity. If something does come over outside of the general contractor's control, and if nothing else comes back, the agreement is that he's going to repay any overage that came above the initial bid that he gave. Corey, if that didn't answer your question, maybe just raise your hand and I can unmute you in a second, okay? Mr. Mike, does this include prohibition of using my own HELOC? Mike, HELOC funds on a loan that you are on a property that you own are considered sourced and seasoned liquid funds, perfectly acceptable. Mr. Flores, if I buy a property ready, no repairs needed, can I do the delayed cash out refinance and get the total amount I paid? Absolutely. So the delay doesn't have to include rehab, right? It's sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. As long as the acquisition was cash, your source and seasoned funds, you are eligible up to 100% of whatever that number is, limited to whatever the LTV and the appraised value is. Okay, so whatever the appraised value is. Okay, and I want to talk about that a little bit later on because there's some important things, because ultimately at the end of the day, you guys, when we talk about refinancing, whatever type of refinancing it is, the ARV, that appraised value, is the linchpin, right? We can all day long assume that the value is going to come in at X, and more often than not, I do, that's not true. It's not more often than not, but I find regularly that what an agent or even what an investor thinks the value is going to come in at isn't always the case, right? So we want to be real careful about what that ARV is going to be and collect as much data as humanly possible to ensure that our baseline expectation is within a small variant for error of what the actual appraisal ends up being. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll come back to that. Okay, Carlos, I think I got you. Mr. Quinn, timely, you're very welcome, sir. On a 12-month seasoning requirement, when does the starting gun go off for the 12 months? Is it the date? Good question. Is it the date of purchase of the building or the date the property went under contract? It is the close date, Bill. So the date that you're the date on that final closing disclosure is when the 12-month ticker tape starts. Mr. Smith, still 100K minimum value on a refinance? No, conventionally, I think that the minimum, so our minimum published loan amount, different than value, okay? And then the LTV is going to be different based on the property type, a single family residence versus a 2 to 4 unit. I'll get back to that. So our minimum published loan amount minimum is $75,000. We are currently making exceptions to as low as $50,000 on a case-by-case basis. So in that case, depending on if it's a single family or a 2 to 4, you got to figure out what 75 versus 70%, those are the LTVs respectively, would equate to the loan size. So the value is one thing, but the loan amount is really what we care about. Let's see. Gosh, you guys have a lot of good questions today. Debbie Santana asks, does cash out refi count in your 10 golden tickets? Good question, Debbie. The answer is almost certainly yes. And the definition of what counts against the golden tickets, I'll just quickly tell you guys. Any residential property as defined by single family up to 4 units, 5 units and above is commercial, it doesn't apply. But a residential property that has a loan on it that is in your personal name or personally guaranteed by you. This one comes up a lot too, where you got, let's say, a non-QM loan or even a commercial loan where the loan and title close in the entity name and the LLC name. But if you signed a personal guarantee, Fannie and Freddie's definition of what counts, that'll count. So any residential property that is in your name or personally guaranteed by you, AKA a recourse loan, will count against the 10. Ms. Lawrence, just want to reconfirm, if I use funds from my HELOC and refi with Fannie Freddie, the timing of when I set up the HELOC doesn't matter. There is no seasoning on the HELOC at all. That is correct, Katia. There's not going to be any seasoning whatsoever. The HELOC are considered, the equity in that property that you have just untapped is considered liquid source and seasoned funds immediately, as long as you're on the HELOC. Now, just in case this question comes up, let's say we've got a partnership or a husband and wife team, and Mr. Smith is on the HELOC, right? He's the only one on the HELOC, and she's not on the HELOC, but she's used the funds from the HELOC to purchase a property in her name, and now she wants to refinance and pull cash out. Those are not her source and seasoned funds. She wasn't on that loan. Okay, so little tidbit there. Let's see if I got them all. Carlos S, what's the big difference between standard and rate and term refi? I'm just about to get into that. So let's go to, and this is where we get into some of the more, I think, important hacks, because not everybody has 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever cash sitting around that they can go pay cash, or maybe they don't have a HELOC or whatever it may be. Here is one of the great workarounds that we're finding. So rate and term refinance. Okay, forget about cash out for a second. A rate and term refinance does not require any seasoning. If we are simply repaying an existing loan with a new loan, we're good to go. We will give you up to 80% loan to value on the ARV. Okay, so for example, if you used other people's money, you secured some kind of private loan, hard money loan, whatever you want to call it, it must be a lien recorded with the county. Okay, that's key. The loan has to be recorded against the property with the county, in which case, right, those are your cash, that's your acquisition money and your rehab or whatever it ends up being, right? If you've got, and those private money lenders are out there. So if you have means to go and get that private money loan, then you come back to us and we're simply going to turn around and do a rate. You've already got the cash, right? If you're wanting to duplicate this over and over again, we're going to refinance you out of that hard money loan, which is going to have a much higher interest rate. It's going to be a shorter term, maybe interest only, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. And we're going to replace it with our 30-year fixed, longer term mortgage product, right? Now, a couple of things to keep in mind if you're going to do this. There's 2 sets of closing costs, right? So cost of entry, your rate of return is going to change. Make sure you're accounting for the fact that that hard money loan is going to have its own set of closing costs. And then the refinance that we're going to do for you is also going to have another set of closing costs. But depending on the overall numbers and the circumstances, if you're doing the math and the value is there, the ARV is going to be there, et cetera, it probably makes sense, especially since closing cost points specifically are tax deductible on a non-owner occupied transaction, different than an owner occupied. So there is some secondary incentive. You know that you've got that extra cost, right, for the investment. You got 2 sets of closing costs, but you can utilize those as a write-off on the Schedule E. And while I'm here, let me just add another layer. In doing that, please keep in mind that your debt to income ratio can be impacted. The more aggressive that we're going to be over here in our Schedule E and what we're going to be writing off on an annual basis can end up impacting debt to income ratio and qualifying over there. All right, so those are going to be some of the important reasons that you want Ridge reviewing draft tax returns before you file, if you're trying to qualify conventionally or for a full doc loan in that given year. Okay, so be really careful about making sure that we are preparing you to make the right moves. And you guys have heard me talk about this ad nauseum. Our advice, once we've reviewed a draft tax return, is going to be one of several things. Amazing, file it, no problem whatsoever. I want you to file an extension, Carlos, because the way this is, it's gonna throw you over and make you too tight in debt to income ratio. As soon as you ring that bell, you're gonna have a real hard time qualifying. So I want you to file an extension. I want to get us time, which really just gives us until October of that calendar year, right? That's how long actually the extension is good for. So it gives you all that time to utilize the prior tax return, assuming that worked. Maybe you purchased a property at the end of the year, late in the year, there's no income to show, but you still have all those expenses. Maybe I'm going to come back and say with that draft return, I want that property that you purchased November of 2022. I don't want it on 2022's return. I want you to pull it into 2023. It's a different calculation that we're going to use in an acquisition year versus a Schedule E. Okay, I'm getting off topic. So rate and term refinance, 2 sets of closing costs, be prepared for that and what that looks like. If the values are there, then it probably works out. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to do questions yet. Let me just go back to where I was here. What time is it? Okay, I think we've got some time. Rehab present. I got that. Okay. Yeah, and we talked about debt to income ratio. So let's talk about real quickly, let's talk about the appraisal piece, okay? Appraisals, like anything, you guys are not created equal. Appraisers, like anything, are not created equal. And by definition, an appraisal is an opinion of value, okay? Just saying that out loud it sounds a little bit scary to me, but that's the reality of it. It's an opinion of value. So the first thing that I would share with you guys is that most of the appraisers or appraisals that are done in this country, I would say a vast majority, 98% of the appraisals that are done day in and day out are for an owner occupied basis. Non-owner occupied appraisals are going to be a small blip of what appraisers do. Most appraisers do. Very few, kind of like Ridge as a lender that focuses on investors, and that's our specialty. If you find an appraiser that does that work more often or as a specialty, they're going to be very, very far and few between. And the problem with that is that an appraisal for an investment property is a wildly different thing with different understanding about a distressed sale, and if you have renovation and rehab into it. All of those variants and nuances are not going to be found to as an understood over here when they would be with somebody that does non-owner occupied all the time, or somebody that, for example, might be coming from 20 miles away to appraise a property in a different town. So those things make a difference. And the reason that I'm going into all of this is because for Ridge, one of the other value adds I think that we bring to the table is that we have a preferred panel within our AMC. So let's unpack this. AMC stands for Appraisal Management Company. This is a third-party entity. There's probably a half a dozen of them in the nation that are the big boys. There's probably more than that, but the ones most widely used, there's probably half a dozen of them. And we have, I think, 3 or 4 that we use most regularly. Post 0809, Dodd-Frank, the rules, the wide sweeping financial rules as it applies to appraisals, mandated that every appraisal that's ordered has to be ordered through a third-party AMC, all of them without exception. The other fine point restrictions and rules there are that as the lender, I am not even allowed to speak to an appraiser. Everything has to have that lead veil in between us, the lender and the agents, et cetera, and the appraiser. Okay, so the AMC, we put our order in through the AMC. The AMC then goes and puts the order out there, and then the appraiser, by random selection, will grab at that order. Now, a preferred panel, which is what it's all within regulation and compliance, the preferred panel allows us in each individual market to have, and the more the better, to have 5, 10, 15 different appraisers that we have selected. It's still a random selection when the order goes out, but we've selected these appraisers to be on our panel that understand non-owner occupied first and foremost. The other thing that we're going to be looking for is that they've got experience, right? They've been doing this for X number of years, that they're not coming from out of state or a long distance away. All of these different check boxes or criteria we have kind of predetermined to make sure that the panel in any given market is going to be received in that round robin random selection by appraisers that we believe understand non-owner occupied and are going to give us the fairest valuation based on all that nuance. Okay. So when I was talking about that appraisal piece a bit ago and how important it is, it's huge. I more times than I care to admit over the years, Mr. Jones has come and he's ready to do his BRRRR, and we're ordering the appraisal. And he thinks that based on his research or maybe what he's being told, et cetera, that the value is going to come in at 150 and the value comes in at 80. I've seen stuff like that happen. I mean, think about how devastating that would be. That's a problem, right? If he's got 100,000 into it and he's going to get a loan based on an $80,000 value, because remember, 75% of 80 is what the loan is, and he's got 100 plus into it, that's a real problem. So guys, it's very, very important to make sure as the highest priority that you understand within that small variant for error what that appraised value is going to be. So here's my advice. Gather as much data as possible. Use the Zillows, use the Redfins, all of that stuff. Gather that up. If you have an agent or a turnkey or somebody that has access to the multiple listing service, you're going to grab those comps as well. You can check in with us. We have access to county records. We can pull what we call property profiles that will give recent sales that we can kind of add into the mix. Remembering though, very, very important, if there's rehab, even just lipstick and eyeliner and stuff, if it's just cosmetic, but anything even more substantial than that, the ones and the zeros from the data that you're pulling for these comps, it's not going to account for that. It doesn't know that you put in $50,000 and just gutted it and all of this has happened, right? The comps and things that you're going to be getting are based on the sales of like kind, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, square footage, distance to the property, age of the closing, et cetera. So all of those things are going to be important to navigate and understand before you get into something like that and you expect a certain value that may not be what it is. So just do your homework there. Okay, let me get back to some questions. We got a lot of them here. Hold on, gang. So Eustace, hi Eustace. How much of a down payment would I need to purchase a commercial property? I've heard 20%, but not sure if that's still the case. So a commercial property that can be 5-plex and above, it could be mixed use, it could be a storage unit, whatever it is. 20%, Eustace, is possible. It's really going to depend on the debt service of the investment of the commercial property. The higher the debt service ratio, meaning the income that the property is going to generate versus the monthly liability of the tax and the insurance and the mortgage payment, the higher the better, and the higher the more leverage you can expect to get. More often than not, I would say the average for commercial is probably 75%, but that 20% is viable. It's possible. Just it's probably case by case. Let's see, what else do we have here? Alex and Corey, I'll come back to you guys because you've had questions. TS, second mortgage on existing investment property with good equity, but historically low fixed rate interests. You know what? How do I open this up for you guys to unmute yourselves? Because I'm going to try not to interpret and you guys can ask yourself. This one's easy. What are the average closing costs for rate and term refinance? It's going to be dependent upon the state. Different states are going to have different title fees, transfer taxes that can be fairly substantial, and the loan size can play into that. Property taxes in different parts of the country are going to be different too. But on average, I would say 3%, 3 to 4% of the loan size is probably what you can expect in closing costs. It's going to be a little bit more on a refinance than it would on a purchase in most cases, because on a purchase, you've got the seller paying a portion of the title insurance and things like that. So a refinance is usually just a few $100 more, again, depending on the variables that I mentioned. Let me unmute a few of you. Alex, you're first. Do you want to ask your question, Alex?
Yeah, so hi, Caeli. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you, sir?
Good. So quick question. So if I understood correctly, if for the non-delayed cash out refi, if it's 100% cash, can you basically just turn that back around and turn it into an all-in-one or a velocity HELOC and use that as like a golden ticket?
Absolutely, and I love that. That's a great point. So guys, what I believe, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, what he's talking about is that he paid cash for a property, right? And he wants to utilize a line of credit via the all-in-one. If you haven't heard about this, this is our first lien HELOC. It's my absolute favorite loan product for the right individual, but especially for investors. I think that it's brilliant. The problem with the all-in-one though is at closing, you have to take a minimum draw of 100,000. So you're going to need to be ready to redeploy those funds before you then return them again. We don't want you having to take $100,000 draw on funds that you're not going to be using quickly, right? You're going to be paying interest that isn't going back out to work for you. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. And that's, if I was doing it that way, the all-in-one would be absolutely something I would have in my arsenal.
Cool.
Yeah, good question. Corey, you're next. Let's see, where's Mr. Corey? What was your question, Mr. Brown?
Hey, Caeli, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, sir.
Hey, so my first question, I wanted to apologize. I confused you a little bit. I was basically asking about the setting aside of rehab funds, and if you had to utilize them, if you had to utilize them completely. You did answer that question already. My second question was more so to piggyback off of what you had made mention earlier regarding a refi on a hard money loan. If someone does take a hard money loan, obviously utilizing that to buy a property in cash, so they're paying a higher interest rate, and then they refi with Ridge, does Ridge then keep that loan, or is that also packaged up and then outsourced as well?
All of our loans. So let me just repeat back to you what you just said to me. So you went and got a private money loan for $100,000 and a 12% interest rate and whatever the costs are, and you want to get out of that loan and replace it with 30-year fixed at 6.5, 7, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We're gonna get you that 6.5, 7 30-year fixed mortgage. pay off the old mortgage, and then that, along with any other mortgage-backed security that we funded, owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied, purchase, cash out, refi, whatever, is going to be bundled and it's going to be resold on the secondary market.
Okay, perfect. One final thing, while I have you, maybe this may be a question that others may have as well. Do you recommend, or is it on a case-by-case basis based on what the new investor like myself would be looking into? Do you recommend, if you're looking at SFRs, but four units or less, do you base that on your conversations with the investor? I mean, if they're a air quotes rookie investor, or are you looking at different things? That was kind of a confusing question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So let me say that back. So you're asking, from my perspective, maybe some advice as a new investor. What is maybe the most appropriate first move, or does this make sense over that, or is this more sound strategy than this one? Is that what you're saying, Corey?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my answer is 100%. We're always happy. I'm always happy to share my 1.3 cents worth, as I like to say. You guys are going to take what you want. You're going to leave the rest. I think my overreaching advice, especially for new investors, is to mitigate as much risk as possible. And that means that for your first transaction or two, I would say stick with a single family residence. I would say stick on the lower end of the price point spectrum. And I would also make sure that it was the highest cash flow market as possible, and then a long-term renter. And let me explain why I would give that advice as let's say, for somebody that's just getting into this. Overall, though, so take everything that I just said and add this to it as well. Overall, my big picture advice is a balanced portfolio, and having based on your goals, right, your qualifications and your goals, having a well-rounded portfolio that includes long-term rent, short-term rent, maybe mid-term rent, that has single family, that has 2 to 4, right? All of those different variables, that has properties located in higher appreciating areas, and then those in the more high cash flow. More often than not, you guys are going to find that when you start to look at the lowest risk possible, that high cash flow, more often than not, the markets that are going to give you the highest possible cash flow on a long-term rental, single family residence, are not going to have much appreciation to speak of, right? The long-term rent is going to be less risk than maybe a 2 to 4 unit property, that maybe some of them, or maybe you have short-term rental that's too seasonal. You don't know what to predict. It's kind of newer to short-term rentals have been around a long time, but not to the level or to the degree that they have now. It's just not as secure. So, right. So all of those variables, however risk averse or aggressive you want to be, will play a role too. But I think for you, Corey, those are some of the tidbits that I would offer: is keep it real simple, get your sea legs, have a few properties that you've acquired over whatever period of time that you're trying to do this, and start to learn some of the nuances that wouldn't otherwise be available in all the information that you're assuming or absorbing right now. Hopefully that helps answer your question, but that's some of what I would give you for advice.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
You bet, Corey. Anybody else have anything? I don't see any other questions that I'd missed. Let's see. Actually, there's one from TS, and I'm not sure. Let him talk. Hi, TS.
Hey, hello. Thank you for taking the question. I have an existing property with about $500,000 in equity in it, but I have $500,000 debt on it, and it's fixed at 3.5%. I wanted to take $250,000 out to buy another fourplex, but I don't want to refinance the whole amount because of the higher interest rates.
Sure.
Is that possible?
It is. It is possible. Before I answer the how to that, I would tell you that a few things. One, I would have you look at the all-in-one. While the interest rate on the all-in-one is higher, you're going to need to do the math, and the concept of the all-in-one is not about interest rate; it's about velocity of money, and we don't have time for me to go down that rabbit hole. The interest rate, I've been running the all-in-one simulator with clients that have the interest rates that everybody secured in the last 2 years, right? The 3.5, whatever it is. And depending on their circumstances and the amount of depository income that they have and their spending habits and their cash flow, I have seen 3% 15-year fixed interest rates just get annihilated with the all-in-one in interest savings. And then you've got the flexibility of this line of credit for 30 years. So TS, maybe email me, email info@ridgelendinggroup.com, please. And we can have some one-on-one and look at it together. Otherwise, if it turns out when we do the simulator and the math won't lie, it'll tell us very clearly if your 3.5 is the one to keep or if the all-in-one is the better one. Okay, so we can get to that and figure that out definitively. But let's say one of two things, that the 3.5 is the better option. The simulator says don't mess with that, or psychologically or whatever it is, you just don't want to mess with it. Here are your options. On a non-owner occupied, you're not going to find second lien HELOCs. Okay, home equity line of credit in second lien on a rental property are not to be found. If anybody on this call finds one, I would love to know about it because I want to start referring, because I don't think they're out there or available. But what you do have access to is what's called a HE loan, and we can do these for you. A HE loan is a fixed rate, 30-year fixed second lien mortgage, just like your first lien, but it's in second lien and the interest rate is going to be quite a bit higher. So you're probably looking at between, depending on the variables, the combined loan to value, the credit score, the loan amount, all of these things, I would say anticipate interest rates from 10 to 13% in a second lien position, but that might be an option for you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet. One other question here. I see, do you guys offer 5+ refi? I think that you're talking about 5 units, like commercial. And the answer to your question is yes. We have a commercial division that can accommodate 5plex, 10plex, whatever. Just feel free to email us and we can get you more information on that. Okay, a couple more. 5plex cash out refi. Yeah, same. Yes, that is absolutely acceptable. We can do that. Just shoot us an email. Miss Lawrence is back. I'm too struggling with cash flow versus appreciation markets. This pushes the BRRRR strategy to find rehab since there is very limited natural appreciation. Do you approve lenders based on experience in doing rehabs? Katie, I'm not understanding the question. Can I unmute you real quick and you can ask that? Where are you? There you are. Do you want to ask that live?
Sure. Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'm sorry. I meant borrowers, not lenders.
Okay. Do you? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you look at the level of rehab that's required to determine whether you would approve a borrower and the level of funding or financing terms that you would give to that particular borrower.
I don't think that's going to be too much in our focal point, Katie. I think that if it appraises, that's all that's going to matter to us. And then if the other qualifications are met, so whether it's a debt to income ratio about you and your income and your liabilities, et cetera, or if we end up taking a debt service coverage ratio where the property has to stand on its own, the amount of rehab that was required in the property is not, it shouldn't come into play unless it doesn't appraise, and that could be an issue. Is that what you're asking?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonebreak, I had the privilege of speaking to you yesterday, sir. You're asking what types of HELOCs are available. So there are second lien HELOCs, obviously. We do those on primary residence only, but I would tell you guys, even though we have access to them, you can get a better rate and maybe not as high a leverage, but you can probably get better terms with your credit union, your local bank, whatever. The HE loan I talked about for the non-owner occupied, we can do those up to 85% CLTV, but my favorite of all favorites is going to be the all-in-one. For anybody on this call that does not know what the all-in-one is, I encourage you to email info@ridgelendinggroup.com and say, get me information on the all-in-one. We'll send you what we have, and then we can schedule some time to talk one-on-one and look at that online simulator, which will tell us very clearly if you and or the property in question is a good, legitimate property or idea for using or utilizing the all-in-one. Okay, guys, we're over. I love that almost everybody stayed. Let me make sure I got all my questions. Anything that wasn't answered, you guys go ahead and send into info. I think I got everybody, but if I didn't, send an email to info. And then in closing, before I forget, so there's a turnkey in Florida. It's a luxury short-term rental. I think 1.19 million is the price point. The cash flow is amazing. Anybody that's in the market for that type of property, please let me know. Email me directly, cridge@ridgelendinggroup.com. And I'll send you information and contact. The cash flow, like I said, looks amazing. There's some good incentives. I think the builder is trying to offload this property, is what it looks like to me. And I don't usually market this kind of stuff. It's not what I do. It's not my wheelhouse, but this was brought to my attention. And so I thought that I would present it to you guys. Anybody that's interested, just give me a ping and I'll send you what I've got on it. If there's nothing else, I don't think there is. I think we got them all. Thank you for being here. This is going to be posted to the community, the recording. If anybody wants to go back and listen to it again, it'll be up there for you in a day or two. And hopefully Larry will be back next week and you won't have to deal with my clumsiness in all of this. Thanks for being with me, guys. I'll see you next week.